and welcome to Asase Ba, a podcast that honors oral tradition and shines light on Ghanaian culture and stories that are often untold or silenced. I'm your host, Michelle, and my pronouns are she and her. So yes, welcome to episode 3 of Asase Ba. Thank you to everyone that has supported the podcast. Thank you to everyone that has liked, retweeted, commented on different episodes. I really see those things and I really appreciate people who are doing that. Like, it means so much to me. And, with that said, like, sharing goes a long way. If you're enjoying the episodes, share it, subscribe so that you can keep updated on when episodes drop, and share it with your brother, your sister, your uncle, your cousin, your auntie, your friends, your coworker, whoever you think will really enjoy the episodes and really appreciate it. You can also follow the Twitter page at asasebapod just to keep updated on the podcast. I regularly post on there. And also, if you know someone who's looking for a Ghanaian podcast that explores stories that are often untold or silenced, tell them about Asase Ba. Say, hey, I listened to this amazing podcast, Asase Ba, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Why don't you check it out? And they can listen to it on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, Castbox, along with most major podcast platforms. And it just really means a lot to me. And I love to see that y'all are listening and, engaging and building that community, because that's what this is all about, So yeah, and when sharing on social media or like providing your feedback or commentary, use the hashtag asasebapod, just so that I can see the conversation and other people can see it as well. So yes. So on to episode 3. Super excited. Every episode is super exciting and produced by myself, and I'm having all these really great conversations with different people, interviewing different people about their Ghanaian stories. And each episode I'm always so excited to release it. I'm like, people are gonna really appreciate this. Some people will relate to this certain thing. It's just, I stand this podcast. So, and everyone that I've interviewed is just so raw and candid and honest, and just really, it's just really exciting to finally release these episodes. And with that said, episode 3, you'll hear how great it is. But in this episode, I interview Olivia. And Olivia's pronouns are she and her. And Olivia is a makeup artist and writer. And in this episode, she talks about her experiences as a queer Ghanaian woman. And during my conversation with Olivia, we also discussed bisexuality, biphobia, the nuances of having a romantic and or sexual attraction towards women, her relationship to church, redefining her relationship with God, publishing authentic work while not out, dating when living with family, writing as a de-stressing outlet, sexual health and safety, and so much more. This interview, talking to Olivia, everything, she was just so candid and just raw and honest, and I really appreciate her being on Asase Ba and giving this interview. So with that being said, here goes. I mean, this is a great interview that once again needs to be heard and discussed, just like the other episodes. So yes, I mean, I don't even know what to say, but anyways, I just really love this interview and I really appreciate it. And I think a lot of people, it will resonate with a lot of people as well. So here goes. This is episode 3 of Asase Ba. Today I have Olivia with me. Olivia is a writer and makeup artist. Olivia, thank you again for recording this interview again. There were some technical difficulties, but thank you for coming through.
Well, thank you so much for having me again. Makeup artist, lover, doer, creator, and writer. Live in Canada. Yeah.
So today, we're going to be talking about being a queer Ghanaian woman. When you were growing up, were you cognizant of your queerness?
I think there were aspects, like there were certain moments that were curious to me, but I don't think I ever gave myself that label. I don't think I was even aware that that was a label to give myself until, I guess, late elementary, early high school. But even then, I didn't realize that I would identify as that way. There were moments in my childhood where I would fantasize about same-gendered folks. And I guess fantasy sounds like a really adult word. I don't know what other word would describe it, but I remember not knowing why I was having those feelings or those thoughts, but also not really wanting them to change.
So, what was your situation like growing up? Why do you think you were kind of in the know about like how you were feeling, like having the thoughts towards same gendered folks, but not really understanding that? Do you think that's just because you were, younger, or because of the environment you grew up in?
I definitely feel like it was the environment, it was being Ghanaian, but also I don't know, and I could just be speaking from my experience. I don't know if that was really a conversation that was being had back then the way it is now. But it definitely was never a conversation in my household or even in my church, within my community. So I don't even think I was aware, as naive as this might sound, that being gay or being queer was even really a thing that one could be until like experiences with other people from other backgrounds.
So what was the, I guess, perception of queerness within your family and within church? You mentioned those two communities, and they're like prime agents of socialization and stuff like that. So what was the perception there?
Once it was talked about, it wasn't ever like a formal discussion. It was more of like comments you would hear as you're watching CB24 and Pride comes on. Just it's homophobic and transphobic and everything that isn't within our cultural limitations and borders phobic. Like if it's not of us, then it's strange and it's weird and it's not really what we do. But there's so many of us that are just living in secrecy, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but in a like, because of the way that it's perceived, it's really hard to come out and to express yourself and to own who you are and to be openly proud of that.
Yeah, I totally get that. So when did you, I guess, start to come into awareness, I guess a deeper understanding of your queerness?
I think it was university, because that was the first time I was away from home. I didn't go to school in the same place that I grew up in, so I was able to explore who I am and what it is to be Olivia without her family nearby to offer their input. Yeah, it was more of like a sexual introduction or desire, which made it feel like more okay, because that was around the time when people were talking about threesomes, and like women were expressing, it was more of like threesomes that would pleasure the male gaze. But within that context, it felt okay to be like, okay, like I'd be down to experience that. And then it was a little later, or much later, that I realized it was also romantic. And it took a really long time to figure that out. And I think there was just so much unlearning that had to be done before I could recognize that.
And we've discussed this pre-interview too, like how, you know, some folks, I guess, a sexual attraction, even though it is, you know, it is legitimate to, let's say, have a sexual attraction towards a gender, but not romantic. But sometimes it's, you know, it seems like it's due to the conceptualization of like queer women in the media, and, you know, it's deemed as sexy towards, you know, straight men. So that's kind of the arena that it's viewed in, like it's okay if it's sex because it's pleasuring the male gaze. But yeah, I do want to say that it's valid to be, you know, because there are people that are like, let's say, bisexual and like homoromantic, etc. But we're talking about something else. Why do you think that it took you longer to see the possibility of having a romantic connection with women?
Come in with the questions. It was probably just not even recognizing within myself that could be a possibility. Like, it really feels like you're not allowed to do anything that is against our parents or our elders or our community. And I don't know, that could just be my background, but I feel like because we're such a collectivist culture and we relate so much to what the other members of our community are doing, you really consider that with every aspect of who you are and what you do. So it felt like it would be okay for other people, and I totally respected and even admire people who could come out and say, I'm gay. But it felt like it wasn't something that I could do. And I think that was just repression, like Freudian deep repression, and denial.
Yeah, like also when I listened to a podcast called Tea with Queen and Jay, and they mentioned image activism, where when you see someone who is kind of a representative of yourself, then it's easier to imagine the possibilities of what you can achieve, what you can do, etc. Tea with Queen and Jay is a great podcast, by the way. I will link to the episode in the show notes. So I guess it's very, in media, like you don't really see that too often, where women are shown in a romantic relationship with one another. So it's hard to imagine that sometimes. Do you feel that in addition to, I guess, the non-support and the homophobia in your network, do you think that impacted that situation, how you viewed romance with women earlier on when you started exploring or started having knowledge of your queerness?
Definitely. I think even recently someone was saying that we're now starting to see more normalized depictions of gay men, but what does that mean for us as women? Everything is still very much sexualized and for the male gaze. I don't recall ever seeing a lesbian relationship that wasn't just sexual. It's only recently that there's one soap opera I watch that there's a romantic relationship between two women, and it's very, very PG. If you look at the hetero relationships in that show in comparison to this queer lesbian relationship, they're just not really comparable, not really realistic. It's great that the representation is there finally, but even now, I think that that's still a barrier that we're facing.
Pre-interview, you mentioned that you were almost afraid to identify as queer because, you had a fear that people would perceive you as jumping on a bandwagon. Why did you feel that way?
There are so many movements, I guess, that are happening right now. And people, I think right now it's within our society, within social media, it's very hard to recognize whether someone's intentions or whether what someone is saying is true and not just something they're saying to be a part of the conversation. And I guess that was a part of my fear, as well as knowing that most Ghanaians would probably say it's because you've been bruffalized. like
I love the she and English mix.
Like you've just been living with the white man for too long. And that's all part of it. You really start to think about all of the different things that other people are going to say, and you don't tap into how you feel or what you feel. And that was my concern. It no longer is anymore because I know myself, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so bruffalized. There's this kind of, I've heard some Ghanaian people say, homosexuality or any type of queerness is not something that's natural to Ghanaians or Africans. Oh, it's a Mrafafor thing, it's a white people thing type of thing. So when you hear those things, how did that make you feel back in the day? I mean, I'm sure it didn't feel that great, but can you speak to that?
It just feels really confusing. One aspect of my identity now cancels out everything that I've known since I was born. Ghanaian pride is so real, and you almost, at least for me, you almost don't want to even use that label because it's you're scared that you're gonna lose the label of being Ghanaian. It's the two cannot coexist. Or at least that's what I think some people would like you to believe. Definitely is not the case, doesn't have to be the case if you so choose. There's definitely a community of Ghanaian queer folks out here and in the world, so yeah.
Yes, definitely. Before, I wanted to explore community because you brought up a point of there are Ghanaian folks out there. But before I get into that, you mentioned pre-interview that you are bisexual. And, you also just mentioned about the idea of people perceiving you as jumping on a bandwagon. Do you feel like that has any relation to being bisexual specifically?
I guess to a degree. I know there's a whole conversation about bisexuality and whether it's real or valid, which it completely is, by the way. And understanding that people, often if they see a woman with a woman, then that means that they're only into women. And if they break up and they go back to a man, then it's you were never really gay. You were just, I guess, playing around or testing. And that's like another fear. There are a lot of things that I think I took for granted when I was in heterosexual relationships. Like, if, for example, I went and told my parents that I was dating a woman and then we broke up and then I went to date a man, it would just look like I was just a fool. Like, I was just like, I didn't know any better and my relationship was completely invalid. And it's like, you can move on or move into something and still have gained something from a previous experience.
Yeah, totally get that with biphobia, like people not seeing, some people don't see bisexuality as like valid or legitimate, or they don't take it seriously, or so there's definitely that issue. Going back to community, you mentioned the start of the interview that you were involved with like your church, or you went to church. How do you feel about like church and your queerness? I know like in a lot of Ghanaian churches, you know, there's people are homophobic. Like there are a lot of homophobic sermons and all of that. So what is your relationship to church right now?
It's pretty non-existent. Like the God I was introduced to had a ton of rules, and amongst those rules was to not be gay. And I still don't know if that is like God's actual rule or just the people who told me that it was his rule. So it's very sticky to go to church. The sermons don't help, obviously, when the priest is talking about how Western culture will have you believing that gay marriage is okay when it's not, and you're sitting in the pews and like praying that no one can see like the gay sign imprinted on your forehead. Like, it's very uncomfortable. And being around like aunts and uncles who have known you forever, but wondering if when you do come out, whether they'll accept you. And it's like, I don't understand how that's church behavior, but okay. Yeah, I think my relationship with God has to become very personalized, and just more, I guess, not introspective, but more reflective of my authentic connection with God and not with the community or the culture that introduced me to him. Because the community or culture that has introduced me to him is homophobic. So within that context, like, it just isn't going to work.
How do you find community? Do you have a queer community that you can, queer people that you can talk to and about all of these feelings?
I don't have a Ghanaian queer community, which I think is crucial right now. It's kind of hard to talk about the intersectionality of these issues with people who don't share that same background. And I think that that's where a lot of like confusion and individual suffering, I guess, can come from. I have other queer folks that I can speak to on other issues and on other experiences, but I really want to develop more of a network with Ghanaian queer folks. Outside of social media, it's kind of hard in person because a lot of people don't really want to talk about it, understandably so.
What does it look like today, dating as a queer woman?
It looks like secrecy. It looks like hiding. It looks like it looks like freedom and just like finally embracing who I am, romantically speaking, as well as learning what it is to have a healthy relationship. I think part of that is being true to who you are and being true to your needs. And I couldn't have done that before blocking like this whole other aspect of me. So yeah, in the relationship itself, it's great, but it's also a little trying, especially getting to the age where everyone wants to know where your boyfriend is and what marriage is looking like for you.
Yep. So what do you do? Like, what do you say when those questions come up? Like, how do you navigate that?
Just avert eyes and laugh and just pray that the moment will be over. Like, there's really nothing else. Like this, I had a church experience recently where my aunt was asking if I was just hiding my boyfriend, and I just had to nod and say yes. Like, there's nothing else you can really do.
And speaking of hiding and secrecy, you mentioned pre-interview you live with your family. So how do you navigate like dating and being in a relationship while living with your family and who you mentioned you're not out to?
There was a tweet recently that said something along the lines of, how are my daughters of first-generation families doing in terms of being who they want to be and having to maintain a life of secrecy?
Oh, girl, I saw that too.
And they weren't talking about queerness, but that's literally exactly what it is. It's just like sometimes it sucks because you're so happy, but you can't share that happiness, at least not yet. It doesn't feel safe to do so at home. It feels like you're going to have to go to very extreme extents to be able to come out. On the more like sad spectrum, I went to an event a couple years ago that was talking about the experiences of Black queer folks, and there was someone who was East African who was saying, as easy as it sometimes may feel for white queer folks or non-people of color to talk about their experiences, for some of us, it literally will mean death. And that sounds really dramatic, but that's literally the experience or like the reality that a lot of people have to deal with. And I don't necessarily think that that's my reality, but it would definitely be a very dramatic episode, very emotionally taxing, and it's just a lot.
Yeah, and I can imagine like the tension and the pressure and the stress that, you know, that might put you in, you know, dealing with all that, like, you know, the secrecy, and then, you know, feeling like you have to hide a part of yourself and or your life from your family. What do you do to de-stress, and do you have an outlet for de-stressing?
I would say art, getting out into nature. I haven't been writing as much lately, and that's probably why I'm so stressed out now that I think about it. Yeah, writing, getting out in nature, and makeup, just anything creative, anything where I can use my imagination and kind of disconnect from reality.
Yes, definitely like writing. Do you journal?
I do.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean, because like when I notice, like for me, when I don't journal, and I haven't done that in a while, I feel some type of way, like more chaotic, like internally. And when I do journal, I feel more at ease and just more like I'm able to unwind what is going on in my mind and my head, you know? Yeah. Do you like relate to that?
That makes a lot of sense. I think often like my thoughts are going a mile a minute and I can think them, but I can't really process what it is that I'm thinking. So when I write them down, I have to take a moment to really look at what I'm saying, and I often like reread things as I write. So it's like stepping away from your thoughts and just looking at it from the outside, which gives you a whole different perspective and deeper understanding. So I relate to that.
Yeah, for sure. I love that introspective work, the reflection and stuff. That's so helpful. And you are a writer, and in terms of, you know, putting your work out there, do you is it informed by your queerness? Do you speak about being queer? Since you're not out to your family, when you publish your work, your writing and all that, do you talk about being queer? Is it in your work?
It's something I want to do, but I'm kind of hesitant to. I'm just not sure how it'll be received, but it's like I'm only considering like the very limited scope of Ghanaianness and not the potential impact it can have on the world, as grandiose as that might seem. Yeah, I think I'm veering towards being more open and authentic to who I am and not caring so much about what other people think, but it is something I consider and go back and forth on.
Yeah, and I can imagine that kind of negotiating that, kind of stifling your creativity a bit, or like just kind of, yeah, like I guess just stifling your creativity a bit and just like am I being like, am I saying what I really want to say? Like, do you ever feel that way when you're negotiating between, oh, should I, you know, put my all into this and write from within, like encompassing like all my identities and all how I feel and my experiences?
Yeah, definitely. I'm going through like a personal journey process right now of even like unpacking childhood experiences and how I relate to other people, and especially like in the context of relationships or even like self-esteem. And I feel like I have to just move as far away from all of that to get into the space of writing about queer experiences. Like I have to move away from the reality or the fear of being outed or being found out or being ridiculed before I can allow myself to get in that space. So it takes a process. And writing is already very emotional sometimes. So, yeah.
So, let's talk about representation. So, do you listen or watch, or like, you know, is there any like queer media that you really enjoy that really speaks to you?
Lipstick Queers on Instagram. They're two lesbian makeup artists in a relationship, in a marriage, and they're very open about their relationships and about redirecting the narrative around lesbian relationships and taking it away from being for the male gaze. So they mean a lot to me. King Mally Magic is another makeup artist. She's Nigerian, and she's also in a marriage with a woman. She doesn't talk as much about it, but just knowing that that exists and that she's open and that they have this beautiful family, like it's very reassuring. Yeah, those are probably the two I look to the most.
Nice. And finally, what would you say to another queer Ghanaian woman who is, you know, finding herself or coming into her queerness? What kind of words of wisdom or would you like say to them?
It's nothing to be ashamed about. It's something that you can also be proud of. And you can be Ghanaian and queer and still find love.
Awesome. And that was nice and succinct. Do you have like anything that you want to mention that wasn't covered, or anything else to say? Any last words?
I'm trying to make everything taken more seriously, I guess, by not mentioning so much of the sexual aspect of it, because I feel like because for so long women in relationships have been like primarily focused on the sexual aspect, like if you talk about it, then it kind of minimizes the validity of the relationships. But I just don't want people to believe that it's somehow, I guess, less enjoyable than with actually no, forget it. I don't want to talk about that. I want to be like respectful of people's, like, I don't know. Some people are more vanilla, you know?
Right.
And I just don't want to make people uncomfortable, but like I feel like it's something that we need to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. If you want to talk about it, talk about it.
I don't know. I feel like I need a question. I don't know.
You feel like what?
I would need like a question or like a prompt.
So sometimes when, folks are speaking about, like, we're speaking about identities and stuff like that, it can become kind of surface level when I guess the folks asking the questions are maybe not part of, the group, or if, you're constantly being asked 101 questions. Is there anything that you would, if you wanted to get deeper into, being queer, or maybe like being a queer relationship, what are some things that you would want to discuss?
Probably sexual health and safety. That's another thing I think a lot of people are talking about now, is the lack of sexual education for women's reproductive systems. And like oftentimes people like to like reduce woman on woman sex by saying, well, because they're a woman, they obviously know what to do and what feels good, which isn't always the case. And I just feel like we need to be more open about talking about what can happen and what cannot happen. For example, there's like a really great online YouTube series called Stud Talk and Femme Talk, and it's just about the experiences of queer folks in Toronto. And sometimes they talk about the sexual aspects, sometimes they talk about the relationship aspects, and I feel like, I don't know if this is just within, again, the context of Ghanaian culture, but homosexual relationships seem to be placed on like a different spectrum, like the same issues that heteronormative people deal with that we can't deal with, and it's all very much the same. It's just different in the person that you're engaging with. Yeah.
Are there any specific topics in sexual health and within sexuality at large that you think people should know, or that you think should be discussed more?
Probably just sexually transmitted diseases and being safe and what that looks like. And I know, like with my partner, we got tested before doing anything, and it seems awkward, and not even to further give any evidence to the narrative that homosexual relationships are more likely to contract anything. Just in general, in any relationship, as an adult, you really want know medically what's going on. Yeah.
Yes, testing is definitely important. Yeah, I don't think I need to say more about that. Is there anything else that you would like to address within the either sexual health or sexuality realm of things? Because it sounded like you wanted to say something.
Just that it looks different for everyone. Like there are different places on the spectrum. There are different things. Like I remember there was a period where a lot of women were kind of saying that it'd be fine if a woman like gave them head, but they wouldn't give them head. And I think that that discomfort comes from people just pretending or acting like the vagina is somehow dirtier than the penis, which is completely inaccurate. Like, just if you look at it from even a scientific basis, there are like women who engage in oral sex with a variety of women and still don't identify as gay, which could or could not be some form of denial. I think that you shouldn't allow like other people's beliefs to prevent you from enjoying or experiencing something that you deep down know that you want. And if you do experience something that you deep down know that you want, don't somehow minimize the other person in the experience. Just take it as what it is and just go for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this lovely interview. I guess we kind of did a final thoughts and then we kind of went deeper into other conversations. But, this was very informative. And I think it's great to have representation and, for queer Ghanaian folks. So where can people read your work if they want to, you're a writer, want to see what you're writing, all of that? Where can people read your work or find you on the internets?
Well, thank you for having me again. You can find my work at www.syzyge.com. That's SIZYGE.com.
All right. Thank you so much, Olivia. And the website's going to be in the show notes below. Thank you so much for listening to episode 3. Wasn't it awesome? So this was episode 3 out of 5. So I'm super excited for y'all to listen to the final 2 episodes of season 1. More great conversations with really cool people. So Olivia's website is in the show notes, so check it out there. And if you have any feedback, comments, you want to chime in on the discussion, use the hashtag asasebapod on social media and follow the podcast page on Twitter at asasebapod. Again, that information is in the show notes below. Also, feel free to email asasebapod@gmail.com as well. And yeah, keep it respectful, but I wanna see everyone engaging and stuff. But yeah, as usual, just keep it respectful. This show airs every 2 weeks, so I will see you in 2 weeks for episode 4. Bye.